Hello, my name's Charlie Winston, and this is my podcast called As We Are, which is inspired by my most recent album, As I Am. It's discussions with people who interest me and inspire me. Some of those people you may know, but others you may never have heard of. But that's not the point, you see, because I'm simply interested in people. So, without further ado, I shall let you discover this episode. Take me as I am. The following conversation is with a very lovely lady called Annemarie Hou, whose official title is the Executive Director of the UN Official Office for Partnerships, mobilising sustainable development goals from zero hunger to climate action, 17 global goals to transform our world. How we met is talked about at the beginning of our conversation, but all I'd like to say now is how grateful I am that such a busy lady as herself should take the time out to have a little chat with me on my podcast, as I'm sure it's not one of the most important things on her to-do lists. So with that said, here is my conversation with Annemarie Hou. I just wanted to say thank you so much for doing this because it means a great deal to me, not only based on our story and how we met, which is a great story, but also to have the honour to interview someone who doesn't normally get into the seat of being interviewed, and kind of trusting me to take that on. So how are you anyway?
I'm great. As you say, I'm a bit nervous because as our little texts back and forth, I'm used to being the one asking the questions, not answering them. So, you're going to get a few questions along the way.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay, no problem. So let's start off by how we met. Basically, I had written the song "Say Something" for my third album, Curiosity, and it was exactly when we were going to start making the video for the song. It was exactly at the moment when the Syrian war broke out, and then hundreds of thousands of Syrians were moving across the border, and going to Germany particularly. And then there was this outcry from the neo-Nazi group, and a German friend reached out to me and said, "Charlie, you are someone who could say something about this," and it just all connected the dots. So I started getting this idea, and then I had a gig in Geneva. So I got my plane from Gatwick to Geneva, and sat next to me was you, hyperventilating.
Absolutely hyperventilating. And I'm sitting in the aisle, and you're like 10 times taller than I am, but you're sitting in the middle. You graciously, let me sit in the aisle because I needed a bit of space because I'm not a great flyer. And you were the most calming presence, and you just started to engage me, and you started talking to me, telling me about what you were doing. I didn't recognize you, and so it was kind of, this little bit of, this is kind of what I do, and then you put some headphones on me, and I remember that was quite a while after we actually had because I can remember thinking, okay, the only way that this lady's going to calm down is if she has to concentrate on something else. I'm kind of painting this picture of you as this total mess on the plane, which I think that's either very fair, but it was actually a really nice way to start a conversation, because then we were really just engaged in full conversation about what we do and where we're going, and the crazy thing for me was that I had just been having this conversation with my team, saying how we don't want to do something with just footage. So it would be great to get in touch with someone like the United Nations or the Red Cross. And so there was obviously a good reason for me to ask you questions, although it took a while for you to tell me really what you did, because the reason you're in London was actually not about necessarily so much about it was related to what you do, but tell us about the book that you wrote. I had written with the team that I was with a children's book, and I found a copy today. It's called The Bravest Boy I Know, and it was about helping children really understand what it's like living with HIV, and it was really to help dispel any stigma and to really show that
kids who are living with HIV are just the same as everyone else. They may be taking medication. They may have some days they're not feeling as up as other days, but otherwise they're leading very, very normal and lives with all the other kids around them. And so, and then it just won an award from the British Medical Association, which was really, really great and wonderful visibility. And I think we were talking a little bit about the book and what it means, and there were just like these beautiful illustrations by Sujin Rim, and yeah, it was such a different kind of conversation. Then we kind of segued back into kind of what you were doing, and we kind of, I mean, when I heard the song, it was just, for you it clicked, for me it clicked. It just, all of it just sort of fell into place. And my head was just spinning with all these different ideas and all the people you should meet. And am I able to skip ahead now? And so we have this it's not a long flight, but we did almost talk the entire time. And
absolutely.
we get off the airplane, and Geneva's a small airport. And so when you get out and you kind of go through this warren, we're still talking and walking, and then we get into the baggage area. And it's a tiny airport, so there's only a couple of baggage stands. And there he is, the head of the International Federation of the Red Cross, SC, who used to be my old boss. Yeah, so we talked about him on the airplane, and I'm like, oh, this is fate. I was fated to sit next to you, to have this lovely conversation, to kind of learn about what you're doing, to hear about this amazing song and what you want to do with the song to bring attention to the issue and help people get involved. And I'm thinking about, the exact person I want to introduce you to. And then we're there, and he's there. And the reason you can see, immediately I see is that he's the tallest person I know, and you're pretty tall, but he is truly the tallest person I know. So
I was looking up to him, metaphorically and literally.
Exactly. He is absolutely one of those people you just are inspired by and you look up to. And there he is, and I'm nearly running toward him, and I'm like, oh, it's so fantastic to see you here. You'll never believe. I think this was meant to be. And he's just the gentlest person with the gentlest voice, beautiful person. Yeah. And I mean, I think he's used to my energy. And so, and of course, we do the introduction, and I wouldn't say the rest is history. A lot had to be done next, but I think that started the song and you on a really cool pathway that it helped millions and millions of people understand better what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an incredible journey for me, and I'd certainly like to talk about that journey in a little bit as well. But the fact that it all came together and the stars aligned in that way was so bizarre, and it was such a beautiful thing, really. But it was also the reason why I kind of mentioned the book so quickly was because I had just become a father to my second child, and naturally, as a dad, you start to think a lot about, you're paying a lot of attention to the kind of possible hurdles that you're coming across with the kids, and paying a lot of attention to their health and stuff. And so I was really interested in that. But it said so much about you as a person, and the fact that you're doing what you do because it's a job, and but it's also because there's an innate drive in you to want to do this, and it's something you're passionate about, and that also speaks volumes as well. But the fact that I got to sort of have a look into your world, and also the world, very much the world in which you live in the UN, but also in Geneva and the Red Cross, and the kind of the links that were all made between you, and that was so interesting to find out all that stuff.
You just realize how small a world it is. And I think one of the joys in life is to be able to connect to people and to make connections where, someone has a dream or someone has an idea, and there are others who share that passion or that idea, and together we are so much stronger than one. And so being able to make those connections is such a great, fulfilling feeling. I mean, for me, it's just like one of the coolest things I'm able to do. And to see, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But when it works, it's a great feeling.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really is. No, but it was a challenging experience for me, and I know that you know that because we've touched on it before. But it was I'd never really dived into that world before, and for me, I was coming from a very kind of human, um, humble place. Like, not really. It wasn't anything political, or for me, it was just seeing people be thrown out of their homes and having to deal with that, and how we can get involved from an outside. But it's so much about perspective. It changed my perspective a lot, because when you see it on television, you see thousands and hundreds of thousands of people flocking in big groups. I think the mainstream media can kind of share that like it's a sort of monster that's approaching, and but what I experienced, and I never really thought that myself, but at the same time, there was a lot of perspectives that changed for me when I got inside, like the gateway at Macedonia, between the Aegean Sea and the Eastern Europe, and then when I was in Berlin and in the camps and just surrounded by all these very beautiful people, many of them, and it was just something that struck me was how there is people, just individuals going through their lives, and that's the basis of what I want to talk about on this podcast, because I want to find out more about you as an individual. But so excuse me for that. I saw your face when I said that. But I want to do it through the kind of look of my album has been very much through COVID period. I did a lot of exploration in myself about how I see myself in this world and the experiences, how they've built me and created me, but also challenging myself in many ways. And so I'm going to ask you questions based on some of the songs that I've written. And so I would like to ask you, the first song on my album is called All That We Are. And it's kind of the first line is, looking out upon horizons, I see buildings for miles and miles around. And it's just taking a look at the world in general and asking myself, how do I fit into this? Where's my place in this? And so I'd like to ask you, with your life, like how do you see your place in the world, where you're at now and where you've come from and where you'd like to go to?
I think, like many people, COVID really asked you to look inward as well as look outward. And I think maybe I was looking outward a lot more at the beginning. There's this massive crisis. We went into lockdown. People turn and look at the United Nations and want to know what is the United Nations going to do. And I'm in a privileged spot to be able to kind of try to continue to help in whatever way I can, because I can just see that the need is really, really great. And so I kind of went into just 24/7, just working, just trying to figure out, and it kind of took my mind off of everything else. But at some point, it all kind of catches up with you. And
yeah,
and I think right now, in my world, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a wife, and I'm an advocate for what I'm doing. And I believe in it so much. And I think that it is right now, my work is taking a large part of my life. And I would say a bit of my identity too, in the sense that because I'm spending so much time around it. And it is a funny part of that. I'll just touch on this because it was one of those things that struck me. And it was maybe something that when we were chatting online or on the phone right before this, you had talked about your outreach for Say Something, to talk with some of the celebrity friends that to ask them to join you on this journey. So at the one point, you're working with, and you're seeing what is humanity, you're talking to refugees, and on the other side, this whole other sort of celebrity side. And how do those two worlds sort of meet and collide, and how can one help the other? I've had a couple of those dichotomy kind of situations where I'm thinking, okay, on the one hand, I'm working with celebrity side, and on the other hand, this is what we're actually trying to do, is serve the people. And how can these kind of two meet? And there's many, many people in between who are doing all of their things. But it just shows you that everyone has something to offer and something to give, and it's just finding those connections to make sure that those happen. And that is a large part of my life right now. And I kind of do it in my I would say I do it for work, and I kind of try to do it for, in all aspects. I guess it's kind of built in me now to do that.
But that's really true. I mean, it's at some point in our lives, we have to find this balance between making it work on both sides. Like, if we're going to help the world, of all these millions of people that we don't know, are we applying that to the people that we do know in our lives, even if that just means yourself? But my second song is called Algorithm, and I talk about, I'm posing as an algorithm. I say, I'll be your algorithm, follow everything you do, etc., etc. Like they do. They become like lovers, algorithms. They follow everything we do, so they give us more of what we want. But I'm wondering how that's affected you during that period where you were going through, looking outward and then coming to look inward as a daughter, as a sister, all those roles you play. And did you find that algorithms, in terms of being online during COVID while you're at home, helped or hindered?
I think it started, I think we all got to know Zoom and Teams and how to communicate through FaceTime and all these different ways of communicating that we probably never were very good at before. And it was, I guess it's fantastic to be able to do this. Like, you and I can see each other right now, and it's lovely to see your expressions, but it doesn't take the place of being able to see someone in person. And that really brought it home to me, because I got to New York really like maybe 6 months before the pandemic. So I had just left Geneva after being there for almost 15 years. And so coming to New York, which is a really big city, and I've been here before, and my brother lives here, but it's a different kind of way of getting an introduction to a city that went into lockdown, really is just as I was getting ready to start to meet people. And so it was such an interesting thing to meet everyone for the first time. I met my team for the first time online. I met so many people online for the first time. Inevitably, when I see them finally now in person in the office, I'm like, oh, you are so much taller than you are on Zoom, because I feel like everyone's my height in Zoom. So it's, and I hadn't realized how much I missed the human connection and interactions. I hadn't traveled for a very long time, and I just went to Berlin, actually, full circle. And it was just having the chance to exchange ideas over dinner with other people, which I've been really careful over the pandemic. I usually have my mask on. I've really tried to limit the being in crowds, and so but just having that free-flowing conversation and people challenging ideas, things that you can't do over a call typically. And so I hadn't realized how empty I'd been feeling until that actually happened, and it was just filling me back up with emotion and just thought and being provoked and really kind of, getting uncomfortable again. I got very comfortable in my, sort of routines and the way we did things, and getting uncomfortable again, and that was good. And it was good to have that debate that is a lot harder to do online, and to get lots of questions and to ask lots of questions, and that interaction and laughing together. That was such a joy to be able to have. And the other thing I'll just say is, on a personal note, is because we really didn't leave our apartment, we got to know. I was telling people, I got to know our apartment really, really well, and not very much New York yet, but was just a great relationship I have with my husband. We are actually best friends, and that was a really nice reminder that we actually enjoyed spending time together, and we are part of each other's lives. And so that was a nice reminder when you're traveling and working and you forget some of these small things that actually
So
add up to
nice.
be very big things. And you've met Blaise, and
Absolutely.
you know that, he's an
Yeah,
awesome
he's a
person.
great guy. Absolutely. And it was the same for me. I mean, during that period, I went into a reflection place of reflection, and it was interesting because when you're together that much with each other, you start to. I started to question and look into, like, in the same way that you moved back from Switzerland to New York. We moved from England just after we met. We moved from England to France, and then we were making a life here, much like yourself. And it's interesting where you find yourselves. You kind of cling on. You can cling on to each other. And because there's this element of you have to go out there and make friends and do this, and one of my songs is called "I Will Never Hold You Back," and it's really kind of a declaration to my wife to say, look, I'm not gonna stop you from going out and finding yourself in this new world that we live in now, and I think that's a testament to a relationship as well. Is how much do you hold on to each other? How much do you let go of each other? Have you ever had that in your life? You know, it could be related to your work or just the role you play as a companion. You know, have you found there's moments of holding each other back and not realizing it until much later?
I I think we all probably do at some point feel that it's so secure, what we have, and not wanting to take a risk or rock the boat. But at the same time, I think we're both people who want the best for everyone around us. And
Yeah,
so it goes back to, if
exactly.
I want the best for you, I'm going to do this podcast. Um, and and no, but it really is about, I want the best for you. So if there's something I think I can do to help, I'm going to do it. And I think we try to apply it to um, the team I'm in, the people I work with day in, day out. What can I do to help? And it's not that I have all the answers, but I am trying to be a better listener and to really to listen to people and to really find out what it is they really need and want. And that's why
Yeah,
for us, it's just on a fundamental level, and I'm going to bring it back to work for a second, is just that
yeah,
that's why I really believe in these global goals that we talked about, these sustainable development goals, because they are at the heart of getting everyone's needs, basic needs met, so that they can not be held back, so that circumstances are not holding them back, that we are not, as a society or a community, holding anyone back. And if you flip it, it's kind of like we want to leave no one behind. As we all go forward, we also don't want anyone to get stuck where they are and they don't have that opportunity to move forward, whether it's because of education or a lack of jobs or the skills to be able to do that, or being in a place where climate change is affecting them and they're not going to be able to carry on with their livelihood. So much of that is happening around the world right now that there's a sense in me that all of us have almost a responsibility to try to figure out what it is that our neighbor, whether it's across the street or across the world, really does need. And
yeah,
I'm kind of
absolutely.
hoping all the introspection we've all been going through helps us lead to that idea that we're not alone. It may feel like it sometimes, but we're not alone, and that we need to check up on everyone and to see how they're doing and what can we do as we emerge from our shells of the pandemic.
Yeah. I guess what you're saying is, like, introspection is helpful as long as we take it to make the balance of outrospection as well, and we can kind of swing between the two, because absolutely listening is so important. But also, I think listening. I mean, being a good listener, and especially, I imagine it's so important in what you're doing. But it's. I can imagine sometimes you're forced to see things from a different angle than perhaps you originally began. Has that happened to you once or within your work where, I mean, you're working in these big, huge conceptual environments. Well, no, it's not even conceptual, it's actual, but where you're having to actualize certain things. But have you started with an intention or started with an idea about something and then you just realize, oh, hang on, I've got to see this from another perspective?
I think that happens every day. And too often we don't stop you just kind of, yes, absolutely. Sometimes you just go full on and you forget that to ask people and consult with others. And at the same time, sometimes I think, that's a great thing about walking into this building every day is that this is the Deputy Secretary General, Mina Mohammed, often calls it, this is our global town hall, and we live in this big global village. And this is a place for people to come and talk about their issues and to listen to each other and try to find solutions. And it's one of the few places left that we can do that on a global scale. And so oftentimes I've thought something and let's go down this route. And it's only through this dialoguing that we find out that there are other ways or someone's already doing it. And we don't need to repeat it. We just need to scale it. We need to give, fueled for it to be able to reach everyone everywhere. And so there's these opportunities there. And sometimes it's so easy to get a little bit myopic and just kind of think about your own world and then realize, oh my gosh, there's so many other smarter people out there who have so much drive and have such great ideas, and they just need a bit more space in order to operate. And so trying to make sure we find them and give them space, I think, is another thing.
There's a song I wrote called "This Storm Too Shall Pass," and it's really about seeing that when you're right in the middle, you're at the apex of a storm, that how well, first off, there's two questions. One is, what's the greatest storm that you've been in, where in your work? Meaning, sorry to call it a storm, but I mean where it's really like, how are we going to deal with this? We're like, there's two things bumping up against each other, and this is just, I can't see a way out of this. And also, in those situations, are you able to take a step back, or have you learned to be able to take a step back and say, this is going to pass, it's going to be okay?
I think what you just said there is so important, that to take the step back to come with the idea that it is going to be okay because I think there's quite a lot of feelings right now that, oh, no, it's never going to be okay. And if you start with that, it's so much harder to get to okay if you start in the negative space. And so I think just coming to a starting point where it says, okay, there is a way through, and there are multiple ways through. And if we're looking to be okay at the end of this, how are we going to get there? And it may be different paths for different people, but if everyone is at least determined to find the okay way out, I think that's just a huge win. And I don't think we often think of it that way. I mean, and then you have to go kind of step by step in multiple directions. And it's this multiple dimensions and different layers. And I work more on the development side, but if you look at everything that's going on and the inequalities that we face, everything gets exacerbated when there is a crisis, whether it be climate change or war or conflict. All of the other issues around our lives and get affected. And I think there's so many different examples of this, but it's just, if you have that premise, which you just said, and I've never really articulated that way, but I think it just helps you think solution-oriented rather than just being in the drama of the moment and getting stuck in the drama of the moment and the horrendousness of the situation, or being overwhelmed by the lives that are being affected and the lives lost and the livelihoods lost and families being torn apart. I mean, it's a lot to think about in the world right now if you watch the news. And it can be overwhelming.
But is that something that's changed like throughout your life, or did you start with that kind of? Did you always have that outlook, or did you start from a place of a more worried place? You know, were you? Was worrying included in this, or
I think
is that out of the window?
I think there's always the worry and slightly anxiousness, and I'm someone who does like to have, try to. I try to be a bit organized, and I do like to have as much information I can. I think data is a really big, important part of it. I think creativeness and data put together. I think of all these
Yeah.
things, but I think there is an underlying worry always. Just because we've seen, I mean, you've been up close. You see how people's lives are affected, and you see if there isn't the urgency, you get impatient. That where's the urgency? Where's the ambition?
Of course. Yeah.
Because you know every moment we lose takes away something. At the same time, you can't let it overwhelm you, and you become stuck. And so I stay positive because of all the amazing stories of people I've seen who have found a solution, who are starting this amazing school lunch program in Kenya, and and all the kids are getting school lunches, and she's thought about a way to work with tech and local farmers, so it's almost farm to table. And I mean, we're is doing amazing things, and that's what gives you kind of hope and inspiration. And I think you surround yourself with hope and inspiration to, as artists. I think, I mean, I wouldn't consider myself an artist, but I do consider myself a creative person who
Absolutely, yeah.
has to have those stories and wants to share those stories because of how much inspiration I take from it. And if I'm taking inspiration from it, I know others will too. And so how do we continue to share those stories and make sure these amazing people have voice out there, and to give us all hope that we are going to get to that other side okay, that we are going to
Yeah.
get through whatever this challenge is okay. And
Yeah.
I mean, we talk a lot about mental health right now. That was such a taboo subject a while ago. And I think increasingly people are thinking it's the whole self that you kind of have to make whole. And so all of the different steps that we need to do that for ourselves, our communities, our family, and then being able to get out into the world.
Yeah, it's interesting you said to do that for ourselves, because there's a self in you as well, and it has to our outlook on the world has to begin with us as well. So, I mean, do you is there an element of protecting yourself, like, and also, does anyone worry about you?
I mean, I just here, I know that, and I'm always really touched by it too. I mean, I work in an amazing team, and we are looking out for each other because it is a high stress job, but we all chose it, or it chose us in some kind of way, and we do think that we can make a difference, and I do feel that we are able to make a bigger difference in some whatever small parts that we play because of that team, and knowing that someone is kind of looking out for me. Is going to,
Yeah.
if I'm headed down a wrong path, someone's going to kind of say, hey, 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 and then, show me
Yeah.
something that's going to help me get back. I don't think anyone's going to let me go too far down the really wrong path. And
Yeah.
and that's the
Sure.
safety net that allows us to take risks and allows us to be a bit bolder and more ambitious, and is because we've got that safety net to say, okay, we're going to, fall forward, or, it's okay if it doesn't work out, but we should try it, or you really maybe don't, let's make a U-turn and maybe, or kind of turn this way. I think I've been really lucky to have that in all aspects of my life, is to have that support and people who believe in you, to say, yeah, let's go for it, do it, try it. There's no one, as you say, back to the song lyric, there's no one holding you back in that sense of it, but there's always someone looking out for you to make sure that we're going for the best possible solution or best outcome or best to make the best of an opportunity or to get through a challenge. Yeah, but I
Absolutely,
couldn't
yeah.
absolutely do it without it. I mean, if you were scared every step and you were trepidatious and you were worried, it wouldn't be, it would not be well, it wouldn't be a fun way to work, and it would be really difficult. And there's so many other challenges. It's nice to know that, we've got part of that. I mean, again, we're all human and we all have different things going on in our lives at any given moment that affect, every part of our lives, work and otherwise. And so I think on balance, if we can have all of this, it's a great, great, great feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned the song lyric again. I was actually touching on different song lyrics through the questions because one of my songs is called Don't Worry About Me. And it's just about getting on with things and, trying to take full responsibility of your life. But I just have a couple quick questions based again on songs, but we'll wrap up soon. But firstly, there's a song called Exile, and it's I live in France, I moved here. But the song is also talking about not only my exile in my music, because it's very much based in continental Europe, not so much in England, but and also the fact that I've got a French wife, so I'm here, living here. I've got my kids are Franglish, but also like I realized through psychotherapy actually that I had through certain traumas in my childhood, I exiled myself. I exiled my mind to another place, to a cloud, which is where I tend to make music and be creative as well. But you deal with exile on a very real level, or you see it a lot in your work, I think, where people are actually moving. And do you think that in the modern world that there's a lot more exile exile meaning like displacement than there ever was? Or do you think it's, and I mean also in ourselves, we're related to the world in which we live, because we used to grow up in places where families would stick together more, be a community. I don't live near my mum, so she doesn't get to be with my grandchildren like perhaps in older days we would have all stuck together in the same kind of area. Do you think that, like also with the algorithms and stuff, it gives us permission to just go and split up and be apart? Does that play a factor into things?
I think it's a question a lot of people are asking themselves, is this whole identity. What is your identity? And as someone who, lived in the same place pretty much for a very, very long time, all through college, through first works, and then moved to Europe for 15 years and came back, where do I call home right now? It's a good question because my husband, who's American, but is originally from Cameroon and lived and worked and studied in France. So it's we lived in Switzerland. So it's kind of this, where do you call home? Where do you want to land? And then you add, we were having this really interesting conversation yesterday with Erin Dopu and with the DSG around identity, and now that there's so many places to live, not only on physically, but also in this metaverse, this created world, where these are really big questions that I hope that there are some very big discussions going on right now about where is your place in this whole entire sphere or different worlds that there are. And if you don't like your physical world and you go into the metaverse world and you create identity there, and are we creating enough of the giving people enough of their own identity where they feel comfortable in their own skin and happy, and that we're not and that their needs are being met, and that their wants are also being met, and that their wants are sustainable, and the things that are good for the world, and it's not over-consumerized and all these kinds of things. What is a great life right now? And I think there's such big questions. And where do you live that great life? And how, what is it going to take? And I'm sure there are going to be lots and lots of questions, not in the too distant future about, finding that place of where you're comfortable and making sure that it is also great for yourself, for your family, for your community. It's But there are much more well-versed people out there who can talk about this much more articulately. But it is something that
Yeah.
I've started to think about, and because it is a question of where you call, where you land.
But that's the point. We're all experiencing some version of reality. I have a song called Letter from My Future Self, where I imagined myself at 84 writing myself a letter to the person I am now. Not an easy task, but I'm going to ask you, Annemarie, what do you think your future self would say to you right now? That's super hard, I know.
It's super hard. I think my future self would say, you know, look at all the opportunity around you and and go for it. Don't hold back. Don't hold yourself back. Try it. Be brave. Be courageous. And at the end of the day, what is most important to you? You will make a difference in the world, but also, are you making a difference in the lives of your family and the people around you? So, finding that balance, which is never easy, but I would like to have said that by 84, that I've done a bit of both, and that even at 84, there's still more to do.
Amazing, amazing. Well, look, to before we go, I just want to say that your book was very, very profound in my family's life, because after we met, my wife and I then discovered that my son had epilepsy, and we had to, find a medication for him, and he has been taking it ever since. And we've still got both of your books in French and in English, which is by his bed, and it's been an amazing support mechanism for him to understand that he's not the only person in the world taking medication. Of course, he's not got AIDS like the boy in the book, but it's a great reason why I wanted to speak to you today, and also just as a friend, I can't thank you enough for doing this for me and with me. I'm really touched, and I'm also really touched by your courage. Like you said, you think your 84-year-old self would say that to you, to have courage. I think you've had a lot of courage just to do this. The very fact that you're the one usually asking the questions, and today you've had to be a little bit vulnerable. So thank you so much for joining me.
And thanks, Charlie, for making it easy. It's a lovely conversation, and I am so excited about everything that is ahead for you and for us, and I look forward to us working together again.
Take me as I am. Don't you know?